I didn't expect to see Tobias again like that, standing in the middle of a crowded train station, looking exactly the same and completely different at the same time. It hit me before I could even think. That same stupid feeling in my chest I used to get at 17, like my body knew him before my brain could catch up. I almost turned around. Honestly, I should have. It would have been easier to just pretend I hadn't noticed. But then he looked up. And just like that, 10 years collapsed into nothing. Scott? I froze. There it was. My name, in his voice, like no time had passed at all. Hey! I managed, stepping closer before I could overthink it. Wow! Tobias. We both laughed, but it wasn't really because anything was funny. It was that awkward, disbelieving kind of laugh people do when reality doesn't feel real yet. He looked good. Better than good, actually. Broader shoulders, a bit of stubble, dressed like someone who had his life together. But his eyes, those hadn't changed. Same warm, slightly nervous look like he was always holding something back. You live here now? He asked. Yeah. About a year, I said. You just moved back. Like last week. Of course he did. Because apparently the universe has a sense of humor. We stood there for a second too long, both of us clearly thinking the same thing but not saying it. Last time we saw each other, it didn't end well. Actually, that's putting it lightly. It ended with him leaving, me staying, and neither of us saying what we should have said. Typical. You got time? He asked suddenly, scratching the back of his neck the same way he used to when he was nervous. I exhaled, glancing at the train schedule behind him. I did have somewhere to be. I also knew that if I walked away now, I'd think about this moment for the next 10 years again. Yeah, I said. I've got time. We ended up at this small coffee place just outside the station. Nothing special. Kind of noisy, a little cramped. But it gave us somewhere to sit that wasn't that past hanging between us. At first, it was easy. Surface level stuff. Jobs, apartments, life updates. The safe territory. I'm working in marketing now, he said, stirring his coffee even though he hadn't added anything to it. It's not what I thought I'd be doing, but it's fine. I smirked. You always said you'd do something creative but practical. He looked up, surprised. You remember that? Yeah, I said, shrugging. You said it like 100 times. He smiled at that, and for a second it felt like we were back in his old bedroom, sitting on the floor, talking about everything and nothing. Back when things were simple. Before we complicated them. What about you? He asked. Graphic design, I said. Freelance mostly. Of course you are, he said, shaking his head with a small laugh. You always had that thing with details. That thing. Funny way to describe it, but yeah. I knew what he meant. Another pause. Not awkward exactly, but heavier now. Like we were both circling the real topic without touching it. I took a sip of my coffee, then set it down. So, I said, keeping my tone casual even though my chest felt tight. You just left back then. There it was. No easing into it. No pretending. Tobias didn't look away. That was new. Back then, he would have. Yeah, he said quietly. I did. I nodded once. Why? He exhaled slowly, leaning back in his chair. I could give you a bunch of excuses, he said. Family stuff. College. Timing. But? I pushed. But the truth is. He hesitated, then met my eyes properly. I got scared. I let that sit for a second. Of me? I asked. Of what it meant, he said. Of how much I cared about you. That landed harder than I expected. Because I'd spent years convincing myself it hadn't meant that much to him. That I was the only one who took it seriously. That night, he continued, voice lower now. When I did know. God, I knew. I realized it wasn't just some phase or curiosity or whatever I'd been telling myself. He said. It was real. You were real to me. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. And instead of dealing with it, he added with a small, self-aware smile, I ran. Yeah. That sounded about right. I leaned back, crossing my arms. You could have said something. I know. You didn't even text. I know. There was no defensiveness in his voice. No excuses. Just honesty. And somehow that made it harder to stay mad. I thought you hated me, I admitted. His head snapped up. What? No. Scott, You disappeared. I cut in. What was I supposed to think? He ran a hand through his hair, frustrated. I thought you'd be better off without me messing things up. I let out a short laugh. Yeah, that worked out great. He winced. Fair. For a moment neither of us spoke. The noise of the cafe filled the space, but it felt distant. Then he said, softer this time, I never stopped thinking about you. I looked at him, trying to figure out if this was one of those things people say because it sounds right. But it didn't feel like that. I tried to move on, he added. Dated, did all the normal stuff. But it was always off. Like I was comparing everything to something I didn't finish. My chest tightened again. Same, I admitted before I could stop myself. That seemed to surprise him. Really? Yeah, I said, looking down at my cup. Turns out first love doesn't just disappear. We both went quiet again, but this time it wasn't heavy in a bad way. It felt open. Like something unfinished was finally being acknowledged. Tobias leaned forward slightly, his voice careful now. Do you ever wonder, he said, what would have happened if I didn't leave? I met his eyes. All the time. And for the first time since I saw him in that station, something shifted. Not just nostalgia. Not just regret. Something that felt a lot like a second chance. We didn't leave the cafe right away. Neither of us said it out loud, but it was obvious we weren't done. Not even close. It was weird. For years, I'd imagined this exact situation. Running into Tobias again, finally getting answers, saying everything I didn't get to say back then. In my head, it was always dramatic. Emotional. Clean. This wasn't clean. It was messy, unfinished, real. And somehow, better. So what now? I asked, half joking, but not really. Tobias smiled, but there was something nervous underneath it. I was kind of hoping you'd have an idea. Wow, I said, shaking my head. You disappear for 10 years and come back expecting me to have a plan? Okay, fair. He laughed. That's on me. We stepped outside a few minutes later, the cool air hitting me in a way that made everything feel sharper. More real. For a second, we just stood there again, like earlier, but different this time. Less awkward. More aware. I don't want to mess this up again, he said suddenly. I glanced at him. Then don't. Yeah, he exhaled, nodding. Working on that. There was a pause, then he added. Can I see you again? Straight to it. No games. I respected that. You're seeing me right now, I said, but there was a small smile on my face. You know what I mean, he replied, stepping a little closer. Like, intentionally. I studied him for a second. The way he held himself, like he was giving me space to say no, but hoping I wouldn't. 10 years ago, he would have avoided this moment entirely. Okay, I said. Yeah. We can try that. The relief on his face was immediate. Subtle, but there. Cool, he said, then laughed at himself. Wow, that sounded way less confident than I meant it to. Relax? I smirked. You're doing fine. Our first, intentional, meetup happened 2 days later. He texted first. Which, I'll admit, I noticed. Not in a desperate way. Just, it meant something. Tobias, hey. I know this is very bold of me after only vanishing for a decade, but do you want to grab dinner? I stared at the message longer than I should have. Then replied. Scott, only if you promise not to disappear halfway through. Tobias, I deserve that. Tobias, and I promise. I'll stay. That last line stuck with me. I didn't realize how much I needed to hear that until he said it. Dinner was easier than I expected. We met at this low-key place near my apartment. Nothing fancy, just good food and dim lighting that made everything feel a little more relaxed. At first, there was that same slight tension. Not bad, just the awareness that this mattered. But it didn't take long before it started to fade. We slipped into conversation like we used to. Do you remember that road trip we planned but never took? He asked at one point. I laughed. Yeah. You made a whole playlist for it. I still have it, he said. Of course you do. What's that supposed to mean? It means you're exactly the same person, I said. Just taller. He grinned. I was already taller than you. Barely. Scott, he said, mock serious. I was significantly taller. Keep telling yourself that. We both laughed, and for a moment, it felt so normal it almost scared me. Because this is what I missed. Not just him. This version of us. But the past didn't just disappear. It showed up in quieter moments. Like when our hands brushed reaching for the same thing on the table. We both noticed. Neither of us pulled away immediately. There was this split second where everything slowed down. And I swear, it felt exactly like it did back then. That same electric pause. That same unspoken what if. I pulled my hand back first, clearing my throat. Sorry. It's fine, he said, but his voice was softer now. Different. The conversation shifted after that. Not awkward, just deeper. More honest. Can I ask you something? He said. Depends, I replied. Is it going to emotionally ruin me? He smiled slightly. Hopefully not. Go ahead. He hesitated, then said, Did you ever hate me? I didn't answer right away. Because the honest answer wasn't simple. I was angry, I said finally. For a long time. He nodded like he expected that. But I don't think I ever hated you, I added. I think I just didn't understand how you could feel the same things I felt, and still leave. That hit him. I could see it. I didn't handle it well, he admitted. I thought running would make it easier. Did it? He shook his head. No. We held eye contact for a second longer than usual. Then he said, quieter now, I'm not running this time. There it was again. That same underlying promise. I leaned back slightly, studying him. Good, I said. Because I'm not chasing you either. Fair, he replied, but there was a small smile there. After dinner, we didn't immediately split up. We walked. No destination, just walking through the city like we used to when we had nothing better to do. At some point, the conversation faded, but it didn't feel uncomfortable. Just quiet. Easy. We ended up stopping near a small park, the kind that's almost empty at night except for a few people passing through. Tobias leaned against the railing, looking out. I used to think about this, he said. This exact spot? I asked. He huffed a laugh. No. Just seeing you again. And I always thought you'd hate me, he admitted. I didn't, I said again, softer this time. He looked at me then. Really looked. There was something building there. I could feel it. That same tension from years ago, but older now. More grounded. Less confusing. Scott! He started, then stopped. What? He shook his head slightly, like he was debating something internally. Then, before I could overthink it, he stepped closer. Not sudden. Not overwhelming. Just enough that I could feel the shift. My heart picked up immediately. You can say it, I said quietly. His eyes searched mine for a second, like he was making sure this was okay. I never stopped wanting you, he said. And yeah, that did it. Because suddenly it wasn't just the past anymore. It was right here. Right now. And for the first time, it actually felt like we might not mess it up. There's a moment, right before something changes, where everything feels suspended. That's exactly what it felt like standing there with Tobias. Close enough that I could see the slight tension in his jaw, the way his breathing had shifted. Close enough that if either of us moved just a little more, it would happen. And the thing is, I knew this moment. Not exactly like this, but close. We'd had something like it years ago. Back then, it was messy, confusing, charged in a way neither of us really understood yet. Now, it felt clearer. Still intense, but not chaotic. I never stopped wanting you. His words were still hanging there, and I realized he wasn't looking away this time. He wasn't running. I took a slow breath. You have really bad timing, you know that? That made him blink, thrown off for a second. What? I stepped a little closer. Not enough to close the distance completely, just enough to meet him halfway. 10 years ago, I said, quieter now. That would have been really useful information. He let out a soft, almost nervous laugh. Yeah, I figured. There was a pause. Then he said more seriously, I know I don't get to just come back and pick up where we left off. Good, I replied. Because we're not those people anymore. I don't want us to be, he said quickly. I mean, what we had mattered, but I want whatever this is now to be real. Not just unfinished business. That was probably the smartest thing he could have said. Because yeah, there was history here. A lot of it. But if this was going to work, it couldn't just be about fixing the past. It had to be something new. I nodded slowly. Okay. Okay? He repeated, like he wasn't sure if that was a good sign. Okay, I confirmed. We take it slow. No disappearing. No guessing games. Deal, he said immediately. And if you freak out again, I added, raising an eyebrow, at least have the decency to warn me first. He smiled, a little sheepish. Fair. There it was again, that ease creeping back in. But underneath it, something stronger was building. Something neither of us was pretending not to notice anymore. We were still standing close. Too close, technically. But neither of us moved. Can I ask you something? He said. You've asked that twice already? You're using it too much. He huffed a quiet laugh. Yeah, well, this one matters. I nodded. Go. He hesitated, just for a second. Then, can I kiss you? Simple. Direct. No pressure, but no hiding either. And somehow that hit harder than if he'd just done it. Because now I had to answer. I looked at him, really looked this time. Took in everything. The familiarity. The changes. The fact that after all this time, he was still the one person who could make my chest feel like this. Yeah, I said quietly. You can. That was all it took. He didn't rush it. Didn't grab me or make it overwhelming. He stepped in slowly, like he was giving me time to change my mind, even though I wasn't going to. And when he finally kissed me, it wasn't like before. It wasn't rushed or uncertain or built on tension we didn't understand. It was steady. Intentional. Real. My hand came up without me thinking, resting lightly against his chest, and I could feel his heartbeat, fast, but grounded. Same as mine. For a second, everything else just disappeared. No past. No 10-year gap. Just this. When we pulled back, it wasn't awkward. It wasn't overwhelming. It was quiet. Like we both needed a second to process that, yeah, this was actually happening. Tobias let out a small breath, like he'd been holding it in. Okay. I smirked slightly. That's all you've got? I had a better line in my head, he admitted. It's gone now. Good, I said. This was better. He smiled at that, softer this time. And then something shifted again, not in a dramatic way, just subtle. Comfortable. Like we'd crossed whatever invisible line had been between us. We didn't immediately go for another kiss. didn't try to turn it into something bigger than it needed to be. We just stood there, a little closer than before. "Walk you home?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. The walk back was quieter, but in a good way. Every now and then our arms brushed, and this time neither of us overthought it. At one point, his hand lightly bumped into mine, and instead of pulling away, he just let it stay there. I noticed. He noticed that I noticed. But we didn't say anything. We just kept walking like that. Small. Simple. But it meant everything. When we reached my building, I stopped, turning to face him. "This is me," I said. "Yeah," he nodded. Neither of us moved right away. Again. There was a pattern forming here. "You sure you're staying this time?" I asked. He didn't hesitate. "Yeah." I held his gaze for a second longer, then nodded. "Okay." There was a brief pause. Then he leaned in again, quick, soft this time. Not a question. Just natural. "Good night, Scott," he said. "Good night, Tobias." I watched him walk away before heading inside. And I realized something as I got to my apartment, leaning back against the door after closing it. For the first time since all of this started, it didn't feel like something fragile. It didn't feel like something that could fall apart any second. It felt right. Not perfect. Not guaranteed. But real. And maybe that's why this time it actually had a chance to work. The next morning felt different. Not in a dramatic, life-altering way. No sudden clarity or cinematic realization. Just quieter. Lighter. I woke up and for a second, I didn't even remember why I felt off, like something had shifted slightly out of place. Then it hit me. Tobias. Last night. The kiss. I stared at the ceiling for a bit longer than usual, replaying it in my head, not obsessively, just letting it settle. Because this time, I didn't want to rush ahead. Didn't want to jump straight into expectations or overthinking. I'd done that before. It didn't end well. So I got up, made coffee, tried to act like a normal person. That lasted about 10 minutes. My phone buzzed. I didn't check it immediately. Okay, that's a lie, I checked it immediately. Tobias, morning. Just making sure that was real and not something I imagined. I huffed out a quiet laugh. Scott, unfortunately for you, it was real. The typing bubbles showed up almost instantly. Tobias, good. Because I was about to be really disappointed in my imagination. I leaned against the counter, rereading that for a second. Then, Scott, you're very dramatic this early in the morning? Tobias, I have 10 years of delayed communication to make up for. Let me have this. Yeah. That got a smile out of me. The next couple of days fell into something surprisingly natural. We texted. Not constantly. Not in that overwhelming, all-consuming way. Just enough. Check-ins. Random thoughts. Small things that didn't feel forced. And that mattered more than I expected. Because before, back then, everything had felt intense all the time. Like we were always one step away from either something amazing or something breaking. Now, it felt steady. And honestly, that was new for us. We met again a few days later. This time at his place. Just to hang out, he'd said. Which, yeah? Sure. I knew what that meant. Not in a we're definitely doing something way. More like, we both knew there was something between us now, and we were figuring out how to exist in it without rushing. His apartment was exactly what I expected. Clean, but not in a sterile way. A little minimal, a little too organized, like he was trying to convince himself he had everything under control. You've always been like this, I said, glancing around. Like what? Like if everything around you is in order, you don't have to think about what's not. He gave me a look. Wow. You're just coming in here and psychoanalyzing me? I shrugged. I've known you a long time. Yeah, he said, softer now. You have. That word, have, lingered for a second. Because it wasn't just past tense. Not anymore. We started with something simple. Music, drinks, sitting on his couch like we used to. At first, there was that slight awareness again. We weren't just friends. We weren't not friends either. We were something in between. And figuring that out in real time. "You're quieter than usual," he said after a while. "Am I?" I replied. "Yeah," he nodded. "Usually you'd have made at least 3 sarcastic comments by now." "I'm pacing myself," I said. "Growth." He smirked. "I'll believe it when I see it." There was a pause. Then, more seriously, "You okay?" I met his eyes. "Yeah." "You sure?" I hesitated. Not because I wasn't okay, but because I was thinking. "Just trying not to mess this up," I admitted. His expression shifted slightly. Softer. "You're not the one who messed it up last time," he said. "Doesn't mean I can't mess it up this time," I replied. He leaned back slightly, considering that. "Okay," he said. "Then we both don't mess it up." I huffed a small laugh. "That's your plan?" "Yeah," he said simply. "Feels solid." It was stupid. But also, kind of perfect. At some point, the distance between us got smaller. Not intentionally. Not like we decided anything. It just happened. We were sitting closer. Talking quieter. The space between words stretching a little longer. "You're doing that thing again," he said. "What thing?" "Thinking too much." I rolled my eyes. "Shocking." He smiled slightly, then shifted, just enough that his knee brushed mine. And stayed there. I felt it immediately. That same low, familiar tension. But it didn't feel overwhelming this time. It felt controlled. Like we were choosing this. Not getting pulled into it. "You're not pulling away," he said quietly. "Neither are you," I pointed out. "Yeah," he admitted. There it was. That moment again. But different from the park. Less uncertain. More grounded. I turned slightly toward him. "We're really doing this, huh?" "Yeah," he said, holding my gaze. "We are." I nodded once. Then leaned in first this time. The kiss wasn't hesitant. Didn't need to be. It picked up right where the last one left off, but deeper now. More familiar already somehow. His hand came up, resting lightly at my side, not pulling me in, just there. Giving me space. Always giving me space. And that, more than anything, made it easier to move closer on my own. When we pulled back, we didn't move far. Foreheads almost touching. Breathing slightly uneven. "This feels different," I said. "Yeah," he agreed. "It does." "Better?" He didn't hesitate. "Better." I let out a slow breath, nodding. Because yeah, it was. We didn't rush anything after that. Didn't turn it into something bigger just because we could. We stayed there for a while, talking, sitting close, letting things build at their own pace. And that's when I realized something I hadn't expected. This wasn't about catching up anymore. It wasn't about fixing what we lost. It was about building something new, with all the history still there, but not controlling it. And for the first time, that didn't scare me. It actually felt right. I didn't expect things to feel this calm. That was the weird part. If you had asked me years ago what it would be like to reconnect with my first love, I would have said intense. Complicated. Probably a mess. And yeah, there was intensity, but it wasn't chaotic anymore. It felt steady. Which, honestly, threw me off more than anything. A week passed like that. Not in a blur, just naturally. We saw each other a few more times. Sometimes planned, sometimes last minute. Dinner. Walks. Hanging out at his place or mine. Nothing over the top. But every time it built. Not just physically, though yeah, that tension was definitely there, but emotionally too. We talked more. About things we didn't talk about back then. "What actually happened after you left?" I asked one night, sitting on his floor with our backs against the couch. He glanced over at me, like he knew this question was coming eventually. I moved for college, he said. Tried to reset, I guess. And did it work? He shook his head slightly. For a while, I convinced myself it did. But I kept thinking about you, he admitted. Comparing everything to what we had. Which is not exactly fair to anyone I dated. I snorted. Yeah, I can imagine that didn't go great. It didn't, he said, a small smile tugging at his mouth. Turns out unresolved feelings don't just disappear because you ignore them. Shocking, I said dryly. He nudged my leg lightly with his foot. You're enjoying this a little too much. Maybe, I shrugged. But I got it. Because I'd done the same thing. Different people. Different situations. Same result. Nothing ever quite matched up. Did you ever tell anyone about me? He asked after a while. I hesitated. Not really, I said. Why not? I thought about that for a second. Because I didn't know how to explain it, I admitted. It wasn't just some random thing. And it wasn't finished. He was quiet for a moment after that. Yeah, he said softly. That's exactly what it felt like. Unfinished. That word again. Except now, it didn't feel unfinished anymore. It felt like we were actually doing something about it. Later that night, we ended up back on his couch. Closer than before. Not even pretending otherwise. His arm was resting along the back, just behind me, not touching, but there. And I was very aware of it. You're doing that thinking thing again, he murmured. You say that like it's a bad thing. It's not, he said. Just means you're about to overcomplicate something. I glanced at him. Maybe I'm just trying to understand what this is. He didn't answer immediately. Then he shifted slightly, finally letting his arm rest properly around me. Not pulling me in. Just there. This? He said quietly. This is us figuring it out. Simple. But it made sense. I leaned back just a little, not fully, just enough to close that last bit of distance. Still feels a little unreal, I admitted. Yeah, he said. Same. There was a pause. Then, but I don't want to overthink it to the point where we ruin it again. That landed. Because yeah, that was always our problem. Too much feeling. Not enough clarity. Or too much fear. Then we don't, I said. He glanced down at me. That easy? No, I said. But we can at least try. He smiled slightly. I like that plan better than mine. Your plan was just don't mess it up, I reminded him. Hey, he said defensively. It's a solid foundation. I laughed quietly, shaking my head. And then, it shifted again. Not abruptly. Just naturally. My hand moved first this time, resting lightly against his chest like it had that first night. His heartbeat was steady. Not racing like before. Grounded. And that did something to me. Because it meant he wasn't panicking. He wasn't overwhelmed. He was here. Present. With me. You're staying, I said quietly, more to myself than to him. I told you I would, he replied. I looked up at him. Yeah, I said. You did. And then I kissed him again. This time, it wasn't about testing anything. It wasn't about crossing a line. It was just natural. Like something we'd been building toward without forcing it. His hand shifted slightly at my side, steady and warm, and I leaned into it without thinking. No hesitation. No second guessing. When we pulled back, neither of us moved far. You know, he said softly, I used to think if I ever saw you again, I'd have to convince you to give me another chance. I raised an eyebrow. And now? Now it feels like. He hesitated, then smiled a little. Like we're both choosing it. That was it. That was exactly it. No convincing. No chasing. Just choosing. I nodded. Yeah. And for the first time, that didn't feel risky. It felt right. I stayed late that night. Later than I planned. At some point, we stopped talking as much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because we didn't need to fill every second with words anymore. Comfortable silence. Easy closeness. The kind we never really got to have before. And as I sat there, leaning against him, I realized something I hadn't let myself think yet. This wasn't just about revisiting a first love. It was becoming something better than that. Something we actually had the chance to get right. I didn't plan to fall back into a routine with Tobias. That was the thing. I told myself, we're taking it slow, we're figuring it out, no expectations. And technically, that's what we were doing. But somewhere along the way, it stopped feeling like something temporary. It started feeling like part of my life again. It showed up in small ways first. Like how I'd catch myself thinking I should tell Tobias this when something random happened during the day. Or how his place started feeling familiar again, not in a nostalgic way, but in a current way. Like I belonged there. Which, yeah, that realization hit me a little harder than I expected. One night, about 2 weeks in, we were at my place. Nothing special, just takeout, some random show playing in the background neither of us was really paying attention to. I was stretched out on the couch, and Tobias was sitting close enough that our legs were touching, his arm casually resting along the back again. At some point, I muted the TV. "You're not even watching it," I said. "Neither are you," he replied. "Fair." There was a short pause. Then he looked at me, a little more serious than usual. "Can I ask you something?" he said. I groaned. "You've really committed to that line, huh?" "It works," he said. "You always say yes." "Depends on the question." He smiled slightly, then, just like that, the mood shifted. Not heavy. Just real. "Where do you see this going?" There it was. No avoiding it anymore. I leaned back a little, exhaling slowly. "You mean us?" "Yeah," he said. "Us." I didn't answer right away. Not because I didn't have one, but because I wanted to be honest. Not just say what sounded good. "I think," I started, then paused. "I think we're past the point where this is just casual." He nodded slightly. "Yeah. I feel that too. And I don't want to treat it like it's temporary," I added. That was probably the most important part. Because I knew myself. If I treated this like something that could disappear at any moment, I'd never fully be in it. "And?" he asked. "And I don't want to rush into labels just because we have history," I said. "But I also don't want to pretend this isn't something real." He watched me carefully as I spoke, like he was actually taking it in, not just waiting for his turn. "That makes sense," he said after a second. I studied him. "What about you?" He leaned back slightly, thinking. "I think," he said slowly, "I spent a long time avoiding anything that felt too real." I didn't interrupt. "Because last time something felt real," he continued, "I ran from it." There it was again. That honesty. "But I don't want to do that anymore," he added. "And with you, it doesn't feel like something I should avoid." My chest tightened slightly at that. "In a good way," he clarified quickly. I smirked. "Glad you added that." He huffed a quiet laugh, then got serious again. "I want this to go somewhere," he said. "Simple. Clear. No hesitation. And I'm not saying that means we need to define everything right now," he added. "Just, I'm in this. Fully." That hit. Because that's what I needed to hear. Not promises. Not perfect words. Just that. I nodded slowly. "Okay." "Okay?" he echoed. "Yeah," I said. "I'm in too." Something in his expression shifted, relief, maybe. Or just certainty. And for a second, we just looked at each other. No jokes. No deflection. Just that shared understanding. "Come here," he said quietly. I didn't hesitate. Shifted closer, letting his arm settle around me properly this time. No space left between us. And it felt easy, like we'd finally stopped holding back. "This is new for us," I said after a moment. "What is?" "Actually talking about things before they become a problem." He smiled slightly. "Yeah. Big improvement. Let's try to keep that going," I added. "Deal." There was a pause. Then softer. "I really miss you, you know." I felt that more than I expected. "Yeah," I said quietly. "Me too." The rest of the night wasn't about big conversations. We'd already had the important one. It was quieter after that. More settled. At some point, I ended up half lying against him, his hand absent-mindedly tracing small patterns against my arm. And I realized something. Before, everything with Tobias felt like it was building toward a breaking point. Now, it felt like it was building towards something stable. Something that could actually last. Later, when he was getting ready to leave, I walked him to the door. Same as before. But this time felt different. "Text me when you get home," I said. He smirked slightly. "Already upgraded to that level, huh?" "Don't get used to it," I replied. "Too late." He leaned in, pressing a quick kiss to my lips, familiar now. "Easy. Good night, Scott." "Good night, Tobias." I watched him leave, then closed the door behind me. And instead of that old feeling, the uncertainty, the waiting for something to go wrong, there was just calm. Not because everything was perfect, but because for the first time, we were both actually choosing the same thing. At the same time. And yeah, that made all the difference. It didn't happen all at once. There was no big, dramatic moment where everything suddenly clicked and we magically became something official, perfect, untouchable. That's not how it worked. It was slower than that. Better than that. A few weeks later, I was back at the same train station where I'd first seen him again. Not on purpose. I just had somewhere to be. But standing there, waiting, I caught myself looking around, like some part of me expected to relive that moment. Except this time, I didn't feel that same tension. That same what if I walk away and regret it again feeling. Because I already knew how this story was going now. And I wasn't running from it. Neither was he. My phone buzzed. "Tobias, where are you?" I smiled slightly. "Scott Station." "Why?" A few seconds passed. Then, "Tobias, don't move." I frowned, typing. "Scott, that sounds suspicious." But before I could finish, I heard it. "Scott." I looked up. And there he was again. Same place. Same look in his eyes. But everything else? Different. This time, there was no hesitation in how he walked over. No uncertainty. No distance. "You're starting to make a habit of showing up here," I said as he reached me. "Figured I'd recreate the moment," he replied. "Yeah?" I raised an eyebrow. "Planning to disappear again after this?" He shook his head immediately. "Not a chance." Good answer. We stepped off to the side, out of the crowd. And for a second, I just looked at him. Not in that I'm trying to figure you out way anymore. Just taking him in. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Just thinking. Dangerous." "Shut up." He smiled. And then, just like that, it settled again. That ease. That familiarity, but stronger now. Built on something real. "I've been thinking too," he said after a moment. "That explains the sudden dramatic train station appearance." "Exactly," he said, completely serious. I crossed my arms slightly. "All right. Let's hear it." He exhaled once, not nervous, just steady. "I don't want to keep this in that undefined space forever," he said. Straight to it. I respected that. "Okay," I said slowly. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying." He hesitated for just a second, then met my eyes. "I want you. Not just like this. not just figuring it out day by day. My chest tightened slightly. I want this to be real, he added. Clear. Not something either of us can walk away from without saying it out loud. There it was. No running. No avoiding. Just choosing. Again. I studied him for a second. Not because I didn't know my answer, but because I wanted to feel it fully before I said it. You're asking me to be your boyfriend in the middle of a train station? I said finally. He huffed a small laugh. When you put it like that, it sounds less cool. It was never cool, I said. It was just you. Wow. Brutal. I smiled slightly, then stepped closer. Yeah, I said. That was it. No long speech. No overthinking. Just yes. And the way his expression shifted. That was enough. You sure? He asked, quieter now. Yeah, I said. I'm sure. Because I was. Not in that blind, reckless way I used to be, but in a grounded, steady way. The kind that actually lasts. He didn't say anything else. Just stepped closer and kissed me. Right there. No hesitation. No second guessing. And this time, it didn't feel like a question. It felt like an answer. Later, we ended up walking like we always did. No destination. Just together. So, he said after a while, train stations are officially our thing now. Let's not make that a tradition. I replied. Bit risky. Fair. There was a pause. Then his hand brushed mine. And this time neither of us pretended it was accidental. I let my finger settle with his. Easy. Natural. Like it had always been meant to happen this way. You know what's weird? I said. What? If you hadn't shown up that day. I know, he said. I glanced at him. You do? Yeah, he nodded. I've thought about that a lot. And I don't think I would have let it stay unfinished forever, he admitted. I just took too long to get it right. I considered that. Then nodded. Yeah. Because honestly? Same. We stopped at a corner, waiting for the light. City noise around us, people passing by. Normal. Everything felt normal. And that's what made it different. Because for the first time, this didn't feel like some intense, fragile thing that could fall apart. It felt like part of real life. Like something that could actually stay. I looked at him, still holding his hand. You know, I said, we kind of got lucky. How? That we got a second chance, I said. And didn't mess it up. He smiled slightly. We're still in it. Plenty of time to mess it up. I rolled my eyes. Don't ruin the moment. Sorry, he laughed. Then softer. But yeah, we did. And that was the thing. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't some fantasy where everything magically worked out without effort. We had history. We had mistakes. We had 10 years of things we didn't say. But we also had this. Now. Something honest. Something chosen. Something real. And for the first time, it actually worked out. Not because it was easy, but because we finally did it right. Together.